Here's a question. If all or parts of the commercial area on Higgins Avenue south of the bridge were destroyed by fire or some other calamity, should that area be allowed to rebuild as it currently is? Yes or no? Okay, given our current zoning, that could not happen, largely because of parking restrictions. We would not allow it without significant variances. If the same thing were to happen to the residential area on 3rd and 4th between Higgins and Orange, so Bernice's Bakery and to the west and a little bit to the south, if the same thing were to happen to that area, should that area be allowed to be rebuilt as it currently is? Obviously, it's one of our nicer residential neighborhoods. It's a fairly high-density neighborhood with a lot of 2-story apartments. It couldn't be rebuilt either because of height restrictions. Some of you may be familiar with the Bridgecourt development out on Spurgeon, just east of Reserve. It is kind of one of the showcase developments that's happened in Missoula in the last couple of years. They built owner-occupied homes on smaller lots, smaller homes, tried to keep the price down. In order to do what they've done, they had to get 4 zoning variances and 3 subdivision variances, and it took them an additional 3 months to work the process. Those kinds of roadblocks certainly don't encourage that kind of real model type development. It was on the parade of homes last year, so I think a lot of people got a chance to see it. But I think most people agree it's really one of the classier developments that's happened in the area, and it's also a development that meets affordability. But our current structure doesn't encourage it. Missoula adopted our basic zoning structure in 1932. There were significant changes in the early 60s and then numerous small changes since then. There are at least 40 different zoning classifications, 48 special districts, 4 shopping center districts, 61 PUD districts, 74 CLB or liquor overlays, and 40 CG or gas overlays. To the average citizen, this system is largely incomprehensible. To the governing bodies, the staff, and the development community, this system is largely unworkable. Most development takes place either outside of the city or after an arduous process of variance granting and condition setting. Neither case is to the benefit of the city or the larger community. In 1990, an effort was made to substantially rewrite the zoning, and it fell flat due to citizen concerns. Efforts to change zoning are difficult because it creates and limits property value. So it creates and limits property value, both of those things in the same package. And it creates security. We all know how important property values are, but I think at least as important in the political sense is the security. The notion that, or at least the perception, that nothing bad in a development sense is going to happen to your neighborhood. That seems to be one of the things that really concerns people the most. The security provided by our current zoning, because it is not understandable or workable, I believe is largely a perception. It isn't real. That security isn't real. It's just perception. It's the notion that, well, it's there, so it's protecting my neighborhood. I don't think that's the case. I think most areas in Missoula, because the zoning doesn't work, will be overwhelmed by change, whether there's zoning there or not, simply because the existing zoning doesn't make much sense, because people don't understand it, and because of that, it isn't fundamentally legitimate. The comfort of that misperception in neighborhoods comes at a great expense to the rest of the community when we talk about how we're going to develop. Because we see some comfort happening at the local in that neighborhood, and we think we're being protected, what we do is we're tying the hands of the community, particularly the development community, to do any kind of development farther out. And we need to reconcile those two issues. We need to have a system that gives comfort to neighbors that the essential character of their neighborhood will be preserved, while at the same time new development can happen within the neighborhood and in other newly developing neighborhoods. City and county zoning need to be simplified, unified, and integrated. We need a common sense set of rules applied in an even-handed manner across jurisdictions. Instead of relying on the complex mix of rules we have now, cobbled together to address a myriad of individual situations, many of which happened only once, and that was probably 20 or 25 years ago, we need to change our system. We need to focus on 4 basic themes: city and county comparability and compatibility, design standards to ensure that neighborhood character remains the same, performance standards so that we make decisions not on the type of use, but on the impact of that particular type of use. And we need to encourage infill at reasonable urban densities. And by reasonable, my notion of reasonable is someplace between 4 and 10 dwelling units per acre. One of our most popular neighborhoods, the University neighborhood, is 4 to 6 dwelling units per acre. The neighborhood on 3rd and 4th between Higgins and Orange is around 10 dwelling units per acre. It's higher density because of the 2-story apartments. But I think it's still a very livable type of neighborhood. That's the kind of density I think we need to be encouraging. That offers us efficiencies both in terms of putting infrastructure in and in providing services, the 2 basic things that local government is about. If we can't do those things efficiently, then you see it in your taxes or you see it in degraded levels of service. In conclusion, I want to offer a thank you and a congratulations. I want to thank Ron Erickson, who is retiring as the chair of the Open Space Board. This community as a whole has made significant progress in open space issues in the last 3 or 4 years, but significantly since the passage of the bond 2 years ago. Ron has been a voice of reason and a voice of care about the spending of those public resources and trying to get the most bang for the buck. I think he's done a great job in leading the community towards making sensible choices with our open space resources. We still have a long ways to go, but I think Ron has really helped to set up a framework that will encourage wise use of those resources now and then on into the future in terms of the maintenance of those resources. And I want to congratulate Eric Berghost. He's going to the Olympics. He does the kinds of twists and turns that we only have nightmares about. And he does it on purpose. I think it'll be a great joy for Missoulians to watch Eric and celebrate with him as he goes to Japan and then returns, regardless of how well he does, and I'm sure he's probably do pretty well considering how he's done this last year. But I think it's a real honor to citizens of Missoula to have someone like Eric who really kind of has put his life into a particular aspect of twists and turns and is going to, I think, get some rewards for it and keep us all entertained in the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Kadis. At this time, I'd like to introduce Barbara Evans. Barbara is the chairwoman of the County Commissioners. She was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming. She came to Missoula with her family in 1940 and graduated from Missoula County High School. She has lived here ever since, except for 2 years, one in Salt Lake and one in Seattle. She is married to Alan Evans. They have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Barbara has been an active force in the community and local government. She was the first woman elected Missoula County Commissioner in November of 1978 and is presently serving her 4th 6-year consecutive term. 4th consecutive 6-year term. Get that straight. Her memberships include Kiwanis, Judicial Standards Commission, and the Missoula Growth Management Task Force. She is also a partner in Workforce, a temporary employment agency. Barbara Evans.
Malcolm Forbes once said, if you have a job without aggravations, you don't have a job. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you we have jobs. This past year, the government of Missoula County has faced many challenges. Hard decisions have been made, certainly not without some dissension, but progress has been made. We are moving in the right direction, that of thinking about and planning for the future. We cannot make decisions in Missoula County based on now. The world outside has discovered what we have here, and as the population continues to grow and more space, personnel, and services required to sustain the lives and needs of Missoula County citizens, we must work today to make sure that we can mitigate the effect of that growth, and we remain committed to planning for the future. City-county growth management process has been going on for about 4 years now. A comprehensive plan has been drafted and sent to the planning board. One chapter in the comp plan is very controversial and has not been accepted by them. That is the chapter containing the DUSA, or the Designated Urban Service Area. It is an area that is inside an encircling line drawn around the city. Development inside the line would be encouraged, and outside the line would be discouraged. Exactly how it would be encouraged or discouraged is not clear to me, nor is the premise acceptable to me. You will find on your table a copy of what I've put out as a Missoula County report. Inside of it is an article on new urbanism, which contains DUSAs. That was printed with the approval of the author and not at county expense. I would ask you to look at that. This DUSA has been tried in many cities, such as Portland, San Diego, Boulder, and Denver. In every case, research that I have seen has shown that it has increased the costs of land, the cost of housing, and due to the resulting shortage of buildable land, has increased the land values, almost doubling taxes. The result is that only the well-to-do are able to live inside the line. This DUSA has and will make affordable housing impossible. This is the most important issue facing this community. This will impact those who can afford it the least. It didn't work in those other cities, and it won't work here. Obviously, I do not support a DUSA. In my mind, it fences in some folks and fences out some folks, and gives rights and opportunities to some and denies them to others, depending on whether they own land inside or outside of a line. Question: have you heard about the DUSA? Okay. Do you know enough to have an opinion on it? Okay, for those of you who do you support such a line? Okay. As you know, we were not able to get the county shop land rezoned to shopping center and lost Eagle Hardware. That was a serious loss to our economy. They would have had a $3.3 million payroll each year, would have paid almost $200,000 in taxes each year, provided 200 jobs at better than average salaries, and paid Missoula County $2.6 million for the land. Question: did you support Eagle Hardware coming here? Thank you. Do you think Missoula needs to be more business friendly? Thank you. To help you understand the problem that we're facing now, let me share a few facts with you. The buy-sell for the agreement for the land required us to move the county road department immediately, so that the construction of Eagle Hardware could begin as soon as the zoning was granted. We relocated the shops to an area west of the airport at the cost of about $2.4 million. Without the land sale, that leaves us with a financial hole to fill. We are actively working to sell that land and have some options for temporarily dealing with the shortfall. We are hoping to get the land rezoned to maximize the value of the land and get it sold this fiscal year. If we're unsuccessful in getting it done this fiscal year, the county will have to put together a package to cover the costs in the short term. Our task now is to sell the land and fill the hole permanently. Question: do you support rezoning this land to match the surrounding area which is zoned for such uses? Thank you. There are many road construction projects planned for this summer, and it will make getting around town a real challenge. The timeline for these projects and the listing for them has been provided for you in the handout. We will also be giving out a more concise, more complete timeline for that when the Department of Transportation has it finished, and we will give it to the newspaper and the media so that you can see it. Speaking of construction, Missoula County is looking forward to the completion of the I-90 interchange this spring. This project includes a new expressway from Reserve to Butler Creek Road and the widening of West Broadway to 5 lanes from Reserve to the airport. The bid on North Reserve Street has been awarded, and there is a $250,000 bonus if the concrete roadway is completed by mid-October of this year. The contractor thinks they can accomplish this. The bridges on North Reserve are planned to be done concurrently. We currently have 3 new industries located in the industrial park: Spectrum Distributors, Neptune Aviation, and CM Manufacturing. They have spent $2.4 million for new buildings, production equipment, and land. If all goes as planned, the new industrial plants to be built this year are Connecticut Valley Sports, American Eagle Manufacturing, and Micron Dental. They will spend $3.5 million and create an additional 120 jobs with the annual payroll of $3.4 million. The value and the sale price of the lots in the development park have increased dramatically and should be a real financial asset to Missoula County. Speaking of jobs, I'd like to address the issue of the position of the county surveyor. Currently, the surveyor's position is elected. As I understand it, the commissioners in Yellowstone County were unhappy with their surveyor, and they went to the legislature and were able to convince them that the county commissioners should be able to decide the surveyor's duties. A majority of the Missoula County commissioners have voted to do just that. I want to make it clear that I am not criticizing them as individuals. I want to say that again. I am not criticizing the other commissioners as individuals, but I disagree with their decision. The only way the surveyor's position can be eliminated is to combine that position with another elected position in the county. They have decided that they will combine it after the next 4-year term is over. So if we're going to join it together with another department or another elected official, auditor surveyor, county attorney surveyor, sheriff surveyor, I think you get my point. None of that makes sense to me. They have decided to assign to the surveyor whatever duties they choose and hire a public works director to run a department with expanded duties. Ask yourself the question, why would you want to add cost to the taxpayers to create a department to do the work that is already being done by county departments? The objective of the people who favor this creation is to add sewer, water, RSIDs, and possibly the parks to the new department. These services currently are included in other departments. In order to get the needed funding, if the road department becomes the Department of Public Works, then the funds from somewhere, possibly road, bridge, and general fund, would be needed to fund the new department. The result would be a possible increase of around $100,000 to $150,000 for startup costs. Or the money could be taken away from the equipment fund, and that would reduce the overall capital budget and lengthen the time it would take to replace equipment. The reorganization creating a Department of Public Works puts the new department under an appointed department head serving at the pleasure of the Board of County Commissioners. The system in existence today is under the jurisdiction of the county surveyor, an elected official responsible to the voters. Ask yourself the question, who will respond the best way to the public? The elected county surveyor or an appointed director of public works? There is no reason that the county surveyor's office cannot take on the additional departments as part of the existing system as long as the funding is moved to pay the costs. I don't believe in taking away an elected position without a vote of the people. Neither do I think we can afford to hire another high-priced department head to do a job that the surveyor's office could do with the current structure. Question: do you support removing an elected position without putting it on the ballot? Question: do you support hiring a public works director and giving the surveyor duties assigned by the commissioners? Now for some positives. There are many successes to report in Missoula County government that I have detailed in the handouts available to you on the tables. In fact, there were too many to put in the speech. I want you to know that Missoula County's elected officials, department heads, and employees continue to be dedicated to providing excellent service to the public. We are constantly looking for new and better ways to do things. We are using mediators to help in the caseload in justice court. We've added a half-time deputy in the Sealy Lake area, and we will let the bid on the jail in a few short weeks. We look forward to the groundbreaking of the new Partnership Health Center in March, and I hope you'll take time to read the information on the handouts. I think you'll be surprised and pleased to learn just where your tax dollars are going and what they're providing for you, and just how much commitment there is to providing for the basic health, welfare, and safety of Missoula County citizens. All in all, Missoula County is in pretty good shape. There may be some rough water ahead, but we have a good ship and a sturdy crew, and we'll get along just fine. To quote Charles F. Kettering, we work day after day, not to finish things, but to make the future better, because we will spend the rest of our lives there. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open it up for questions of the mayor or the county commissioner, the chairman of the county commissioners.
The closure of schools inside the city is going to change the demographics and lower property values. Is this city trend that may bring the kind of decay in our inner city acceptable? How is the city council and the mayor's office going to respond to this?
Clearly, the closing down of a school is a major action in any neighborhood and in the community. Having essentially been raised for 14 years in a legislative system where representatives walked carefully when they crossed over to the Senate, I have a respect for jurisdictional boundaries and prerogatives. This decision is clearly the school board's decision. I think the city has a place to comment on that, but ultimately the decision is clearly theirs, and I don't think the city should be in the business of trying to make it for them. No doubt there are trade-offs, and I think you saw that in the alternative that was presented a week or so ago. Instead of closing Roosevelt, almost close Prescott. I mean, that was the kind of trade-off. 3 classes of 5th graders in a school is pretty darn close to closing, and if it doesn't close it that year, I would think that in the next year or 2 you'd see that school closed. So the trade-offs are not easy at all, and particularly the budget difficulties that the school district faces, which are what's driving their set of hard choices, are not easy either. And I don't claim to be in a position to say I know what the best way to resolve a $1.8 million deficit is. I mean, that is a very difficult thing to do. I think we have a responsibility to talk about our desire to see neighborhoods stay whole and our desire to encourage infill and to encourage family-friendly neighborhoods. But ultimately, how they balance their budget has to be their decision, and they have to make some difficult choices to make that happen.
If I understand what all of our growth management plans will help us to do, is to enable us to make the area that we can serve best with the infrastructure that we have, with the least amount of cost, by encouraging the kinds of zoning that you were discussing, as well as trying to make, and I will say insist, that development further out, which creates a Chief Charles School and costs all of us in that move. That's what I think growth management has to do. Now, would you respond that way?
I agree as well. I mean, what we are trying to do is, through the growth management process, is to encourage urban densities within a contiguous urban area, so that A, we're not hopscotching out with little urban areas all around the existing urban area, and B, we're not sprawling out. So we're trying to encourage a concentration of population. And that's not cramming sardines into a can. 4 to 6 to 8 dwelling units per acre is not that tight. It's a reasonable, I mean, by your votes, I think you acknowledge those are reasonable types of neighborhood levels. With respect to school districts and to school closure, demographics over the last 20 years have changed considerably. And essentially, what we've seen is that people don't have as many kids as they used to, or they're having them later, which also means that ultimately they don't have as many. We hopefully will be able to encourage some infill, particularly in the area between Russell and Reserve Street, north of 3rd. That area serves a couple of schools that were also being considered for closure. And I think that clearly that would make no sense, because there's so much development potential in that area, and we should be able to encourage more housing in that area, higher density, and therefore more kids. So we shouldn't be closing down Franklin or Hawthorne or those schools. I mean, or we should close them down last. But it still doesn't get us away from the fiscal dilemma that the school district faces. They have to find $1.8 million, year in and year out. I mean, just selling a piece of property for a one-time cash infusion won't solve their problem. The other thing is, the other place to solve their problem is to go to the legislature and get more money. Well, how likely do you think that is? I think they really have a tough situation. In terms of growth management, to really, focus on keeping Roosevelt from closing, what I think we would have to do is encourage the development of a lot of apartments in that area. And I don't really see that as being a realistic alternative, that we're going to knock down a lot of single family and build in more apartments. Now, it is a fact that these cycles come and go in terms of demographics. And so it's, I think, unreasonable to sell Roosevelt to get rid of it. But it may be a viable alternative to lease it for 10 or 15 years until the next wave of children comes along. Those are decisions the school district has to make. I think it's our responsibility to make sure that they know what we're doing in terms of growth management, and the ultimate effect of growth management things will be to try to minimize the number of schools that have to be closed over the long term. But I mean, you don't have to look very far back in our history to see a lot of school closures. Central School, which I believe is Barbara's old haunts, Whittier, and there's another one I'm forgetting, Willard. So, it's not new, and I think in retrospect, building Chief Charlo was questionable. But the fact of the matter was that, it happened, it was proved by the voters, and right after it got built, or even before it built, the demographic statistics started turning the other way. I don't know. I mean, the other thing that we need to consider in this whole equation is that currently, Missoula is growing at about 2% a year. If you look around us, and you don't have to look very far, you see much higher rates of growth. Bitterroot Valley is 6%. Boise, Spokane are 3 and 4%. Salt Lake City is 4%. I mean, that could happen quite easily to Missoula. And, people are in an uproar over growth and the impacts of it now. Well, if we had more growth, one of the things that would resolve is that declining enrollment in our elementary schools. But we'd have a whole bunch of other issues to wrestle with, too. So, I mean, I'm not a good enough prognosticator to be able to look that far ahead and say, well, what's going to be the case if we do grow at 4 or 5% a year, which I think is entirely possible. It's something we need to be thinking about and be prepared for, but it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, Fern, but sure took a long time.
Since I'm here, I guess, as a spokesperson for the City Council, and there isn't a City Council representative to speak for us, here I am. Because I think this is really important, especially given the large response of red cards that I saw go up when the question was asked, is there an anti-business attitude functioning or revolving around some of our decisions that we've made regarding Eagle Hardware? And I think I would like to explain some of that. First of all, it's really important to know that the City Council never voted on Eagle Hardware. The developer, Harlan Douglas from Spokane, removed their project before it ever came to the floor of the City Council. The only thing that we did on Eagle Hardware was look at some of the conditions that we had discretionary authority to do in our Plat Annexation and Zoning Committee. And clearly there were some of the conditions that the developer had problems with. One of them was whether or not they should be able to open their store prior to the completion of Reserve Street. There were some very reasonable questions that the City Council had about traffic that would have been that would have happened as a result of the opening of that store, and the projections that the developer themselves gave us about the number of cars that were expected to come off of I-90 and other places into that North Reserve area. So we had some serious concerns about that, but remember, we never voted on it. All we did was vote on some motions in committee. Secondly, there were some questions about signage. Did we want a huge illuminated sign, or did we want to encourage some types of signage that would be perhaps a little bit more environmentally conscious, the kinds of signage that some others in Missoula have told us in the past, other cities around the Northwest and other cities in the United States it's worked very well for them, and that huge illuminated signage is sometimes overrated in terms of its effectiveness in advertising. These are things that we hear from our constituents. We don't need huge signs, so that was another one. I won't go into all of them. They were all similar. There was another one on landscaping. How much landscaping did we want to require? For instance, the Walmart store that was passed by the county commissioners has 51% landscaping requirements. And I think everybody here would agree that it's a pretty nice looking development. Harlan Douglas was coming into the City Council with only 12% landscaping. So that means the rest of it was pretty much asphalt. We were trying to require between 18 and 22% landscaping as a compromise. We were nowhere near what Walmart would have looked like. About 2 months ago, Mike Kadis and I were invited along with Ron Klopaki to a chamber breakfast, and this question came up: is the City Council becoming anti-business because of its approach to Eagle Hardware? At that time, I answered some of these questions, and actually had a few people after the meeting come up to me and say, I'm really glad that somebody took the opportunity to explain this to the public, because it's been, I think, very misunderstood. And one of the examples I gave was, if any of you have driven up to Lake County in the last year and a half, and you've taken a look at a huge monolith called Pomaida. And I've shopped in Pomaida myself, and I certainly like the store. But I think most people would agree that that's not the kind of development. It's, for those of you who have never seen it, it's pretty much a cinder block box. Hardly any landscaping whatsoever, with a huge asphalt parking lot. In Missoula, I think we've risen to a higher level, let's say, of expectations about what our developments can look like if we have the courage to require some of these conditions. And in no way was the city council prepared to turn down the Eagle hardware store. I want to make that very clear. It never got to the floor. We never had an opportunity to vote, and I had no indication myself that the majority of the city council members would not have voted for it. All we were trying to do was make it look and act like a development that would be conducive to Missoula. And I really want to stress that, because I think the city council has been unfairly maligned for doing something that I think our constituents expect of us. And I understand the reasons why that has happened. It's, if you don't know all of the little details that go on in these committees, it's really difficult to know the outcome, but I hope that's helpful.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Canty, and I work with Missoula Community Access Television. I'm proud to stand here today and say that City Hall has made a commitment to public access television in Missoula, and we've run shows recently on zoning, school closure. I'm very proud of a show that will be shown next week on Vietnam veterans in Missoula and how they're coping with their return to the United States after that war and their lives since then. It's a really moving, touching show. I hope you'll watch that. I want to ask the question to Barbara then. When can we look forward to this county courthouse being a source of local dialogue on these issues? And when can we look forward to the time that the commissioners' meetings would be put onto the air? And one of the comments we've had from community members is what a great service it is for folks who are unable to attend the meetings. So with the cost being at about 75 cents per household in Missoula City for this service, when can we look forward to this for county residents as well?
If your question of 75 cents per resident is taking in the franchise issue, is that what you're getting at? That issue has been brought to us numerous times. I'm not willing to add 1 more cent of cost to anyone who watches television, unless the money that would come from that would go to improve television. And a franchise would not do that. The money would be used wherever we chose to use it. I don't care to do that, thank you. Now, as to when you can come and video us and put it out on the air, you can come any day you want. But if you're asking us to spend thousands of dollars to put in the equipment so that we can do it, I'm not going to do that. We don't have it. I'm not going to spend it. But certainly it has never kept Mr. Snodgrass from coming. He has always managed to come with his camera. And if you want to come with yours, I'll even put on some more makeup. Thank you.
On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank all of you for attending. We appreciate your participation, and we appreciate our guests today.
Thank you.